If today were the last day you could love someone, how would you love them? I'm a doctor. I believe in neurophysiology. I believe in dopamine, serotonin, and the brain's circuitry in times of grief. I used to think heaven was just a byproduct of a dying brain. Until I became the one who was dying. My name is Elizabeth Rayner, 48 years old, divorced, mother of a child who passed away, and a psychiatrist once known as the coldest heart in Colorado. I never believed in things like awakening or rebirth. I didn't need a god to teach me how to be decent. I believed in logic, in therapy, in the bright images glowing on an MRI screen. But you know what? Some wounds don't show up in scans. Some pain doesn't live in the nervous system. And I had lived with one such pain for 18 years. My son's death didn't break me. It was the silence afterward that did. When I was 30, I lost my only son, Aaron, on a winter night. It was a fever, a misdiagnosis, a delayed decision, and then a cold, lifeless embrace in the ICU. No light appeared. No angels came down. There was only me on my knees pounding my chest. Not out of pain, but because I couldn't feel anything at all. From that day on, I closed my heart the way you close an operating room door. I became perfect, on time, by the book, ruled by reason. I crossed out every emotion, cut off every belief. I learned how to live like a machine that heals while bleeding on the inside. 18 years passed. I was alive, but I had never truly lived again. Until last winter, I left the city, drove alone into the San Juan Mountains, the place I had taken Aaron on our last camping trip. I told myself I needed quiet, but the truth was, I was looking for a place to disappear. The blizzard came fast, cold, fierce, as if nature itself were angry. I tried to turn the car around, but it was too late. The wheels slipped. The front end slammed into a snowbank. The airbags exploded. I heard a crack in my left chest. Then darkness. I don't remember the pain. I only remember not remembering anything at all. And then suddenly, I saw myself standing outside the car, looking at myself, a woman with blood trickling down her forehead, slumped over the steering wheel. But I wasn't afraid. I wasn't panicked. There was only one feeling, a strange, piercing kind of peace. Then a whisper came, from nowhere and everywhere. You can let go. I turned my head. The snow was gone. All around me was a soft glow, like mist, like silk. Gentle, calm, inviting. And I began to walk toward the light. But, just as the light was about to touch my hand, a voice called out, "Mom." I froze. It was Aaron's voice. I turned sharply. There was no one. Only a white expanse and an echo stretching out, like a ripple that never ends. And in that moment, I understood. This wasn't the end. This was the first door. For 18 years, I ran from one question: why am I still alive while my child is gone? But standing on the edge between life and death, I was asked a different question. If today were the last day you could love someone, how would you love them? I didn't have an answer, not at that moment. But I knew, on the other side of the light, the answer was waiting. I thought I had stepped into death. But in truth, I was entering the only place that would ever teach me how to live. Have you ever stepped through a door and not known whether you were going in or coming out? I used to think death was an ending, clear, cold, the final shutdown of all emotion. But instead, it was the first place where my heart truly beat for something real. I don't remember the moment I left my body. I only remember feeling weightless, like a whispered forgiveness. And the air around me, it was unlike anything I'd ever breathed. It wasn't oxygen, it was pure understanding. I wasn't walking with my feet. I was being led. No figure, no hand, no sound, but everything inside me knew exactly where to go. As if a compass deep within my soul had just been activated. The path ahead was made of light, not blinding, not hot, not harsh on the eyes, but soft, embracing. It didn't light up this world, it opened a different one. I stepped into it, and in that very moment, I heard laughter. Children's laughter. The shimmering sound of joy. Laughter. I thought I had forgotten. I looked around. There were no walls. No ceiling. Only an infinite space where every emotion had form. At the center, there was a pool of water, so clear I could see memories drifting beneath its surface. And then, I saw Aaron, a 6-year-old boy, barefoot in the grass, arms raised high, holding the orange kite. We had made together one summer. Each step he took left behind a trail of light, like footprints of a joy that never dies. I wanted to scream, to hold him in my arms, But just as I moved toward him, a voice echoed, not in words, but straight into my heart, not to hold, but to remember. I froze, and for the first time in 18 years, I cried, not because I lost my son, but because I had forgotten he was never truly lost. We don't lose the ones we love. We just forget how to feel them. Aaron ran toward me, no touch, no words, yet warmth flooded through me. He looked into my eyes as if asking, Mom, do you remember when I taught you how to fly a kite? And suddenly, I was back in a memory. An autumn afternoon, a gentle breeze. A mother, learning for the first time to do something I'd never done before, run against the wind. Aaron said, don't try to control it too much, Mom. The kite will fly on its own. If you let go at the right moment. Let go at the right moment. 2 short words, but a lesson that took me 18 years to understand. We don't suffer because we've lost something. We suffer because we don't know when to let go. A door opened to my right, as light as a breath. Beyond it was a forest of light, where I saw other souls. Each carried a story, a question, a dream left unfinished. They didn't speak in words. They shared through emotion, and every time we touched, a current of memory passed between us. I saw a man who had lost his wife in an accident. A mother who had held onto her son's shirt for 10 years. A nurse who still blamed herself for not saving a patient in time. They had all died, but they were still learning how to let go. Death doesn't end the lessons. Death simply brings us back to the class we once walked away from. I heard the whisper again. Elizabeth, you're not done yet. I stepped back. The door behind me began to glow. This time, I didn't want to return. I once thought I wanted to die. But standing in a place where pain no longer existed, I suddenly cherished every wound I had ever carried. You're not done yet. That sentence pierced straight into my heart. Because deep down, I knew it was true. I hadn't held my mother long enough. I hadn't apologized to my ex-husband for how I took my grief out on him after our son died. I hadn't told my patients, I understand because I've lost everything too. I hadn't told myself, you don't have to be strong forever. I turned back, looking for Aaron. He was still there, smiling like sunlight, his hand raised in a soft farewell. And then he spoke. For the first time, Mom, live again. The light began to contract like a camera lens closing in. Everything pulled away. My body dropped free-falling, as if being pulled back into another reality. I saw myself hovering above the wrecked car, crashed on the mountainside. The pull was strong, like a whirlpool dragging me back. I screamed not from fear, but because I didn't want to leave that place. But then, I gasped for air. My chest burned. The cold rushed in. I opened my eyes. Dried blood on my hands. Snow covered the world outside the car. I came back to life. I once ran from death. Then, I once went looking for it. But now, I understand. I need to learn how to live as someone who has already died. I've come back to this life. But what happens when my heart is still caught on the other side? Between 2 worlds, I am no longer who I used to be. I woke up in the light, but it wasn't the light of heaven. It was the light of an operating room, cold, bright, and brutally real. Everything was back, just as it was. But I wasn't. I heard someone's voice. Elizabeth, you're awake. A sharp pain shot through my chest. I gasped for air. My body is drenched. My throat is dry. My heart is racing, not just from the trauma, but because I knew. I had just left this world and had been pulled back. I lay motionless in the ICU bed. Doctors rushed in to check my vitals. They said I had been lucky to survive. That God must still have a plan for me. But I knew it was more than luck. I had been chosen to return. For a reason. There was something I had to say. Something I had to do. Something I had to share. But how could I speak it? Who would believe a 48-year-old woman who survived a stroke, then came back saying she had seen the light of pure love? I stayed silent. But inside, my soul was screaming. On the 3rd day after waking, they wheeled me out of the ICU. A nurse smiled and said, "You're recovering well. Looks like a miracle happened." I looked out the hospital window, sunlight spilling onto a patch of green grass. Everything looked so ordinary, so painfully normal. How does a person live normally? After tasting eternity, I felt trapped between 2 worlds. One was this reality, paperwork, prescriptions, the sound of ambulances, and the slow fade of memory. The other was that realm of light where I had felt unconditional love, where no one had to prove they were worthy of it. I was stuck in between, and I was alone. In the nights that followed, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing the same dream, over and over. I was drifting through a stream of light. And I heard the voice again. Elizabeth, now you know. Don't let it fade away. I shot up in bed, cold sweat soaking my skin. And one question struck my mind like thunder. If I don't share what I was given, then what meaning does it have at all? I wrote. My hands trembled. My heart pounded. Not from nerves, but because I knew. This wasn't just a story. It was a continuation. I opened an old blog, one I had started 10 years ago and never touched again. The title of my first post, I Saw Heaven. And I came back for you. No one reacted for the first few hours. I turned off the screen, thinking how foolish I must be. But the next morning, over 1,000 shares. Hundreds of comments. Words of gratitude. Stories full of pain. Souls who had been waiting for someone to validate that they weren't crazy. That what they had touched was real. That the miracle was true. I began to share, not to convince, but to offer hope. I received my first invitation from a support group for people grieving the loss of loved ones. I sat down, looked into the tear-streaked faces, and said, I'm not a theologian, not a doctor, not a minister. I'm just someone who died and came back with a piece of the light. If you've lost someone, if you've ever stood in the space between grief and despair, I just want you to know, they haven't disappeared. They are held, and they know you're remembering them. The room fell silent. Then a young woman burst into tears. I just lost my husband. I needed to hear that. I still live in Vermont. Still go grocery shopping. Still make tea every morning. But I'm no longer the same. I don't need scientific proof to believe. I don't need everyone to agree. I just need to remind you. You, the one watching this video, you are loved. Even if you've never felt it, you're not lost. You're on your way home. And if one day you pass through the light, don't be afraid. I'll be there. And I'll say to you, welcome. I knew you'd come. They laughed at me, said I was delusional. But I know, heaven doesn't need their belief to exist. Faith, when I found the courage to speak what no one dared to believe. I don't share my story to be believed. I share it because I can't stay silent any longer. When you've stepped across the threshold between life and death, you realize, some things must be spoken even if the world doesn't want to hear them. And so began my journey, a journey with no map. After that first blog post, I began writing every week. I wrote about the light. I wrote about the calling from the other side. I wrote about the feeling of being completely wrapped in unconditional love. I wrote, as if I were still standing there, in that quiet white valley where there was no time, no judgment. The readers slowly grew. Emails came in from all over the world. Elizabeth, I lost my son. I always thought I was hallucinating, but your story helped me believe in myself. I wanted to die until I heard you speak about coming back. Each message was a piece of humanity fractured, but yearning to live. After one of my posts was shared over 200,000 times online, I began receiving something I never expected to face. Attention seeker. Making it up for fame. Just a crazy old woman after a stroke. Where's your proof? Your brain was damaged, that's all. I closed my laptop. My heart felt like it was being squeezed in someone's fist. All I ever wanted was to share the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, and yet I was being treated like a fraud. I began to doubt myself. I sat in front of the mirror, staring deep into my own eyes. Elizabeth, what if you did make it all up? What I saw was too beautiful, too different from this world. Where on earth do people live with light? Where is there a place where mistakes aren't revisited? Only forgiven? And then I remembered. That light, one could invent it. That voice, unlike any human sound. That feeling I've never known anywhere on this earth. No, I didn't make it up. I'm not delusional. I was there, and I know what I saw was real. A small church in Arkansas invited me to speak at a gathering called Those Who Came Back. I hesitated. I was afraid to stand in front of a crowd. Afraid they'd laugh in my face. Afraid someone might get up and walk out. But then I remembered. I was given a mission not to please people, but to awaken something they've forgotten. I stepped onto the stage, hands trembling. No slides. No presentation. Just me and the memory I carried deep in my heart. And I said, I died. And then I came back. But I didn't come back alone. I brought something with me. Something meant for you. The room fell completely silent. I spoke about the river of light. About the voice that told me, you are loved not because of what you do, but because of who you are. About the feeling of coming home to a place without fear, without shame. When I reached the part where I said, I touched a being of light, and knew that I was forgiven even for the things I hadn't yet forgiven myself, I heard someone begin to cry. Then another. And another. They waited for me beneath the stage. One by one they whispered. I saw the light too. I heard my father's voice while I was in a coma. I've kept this secret for 20 years. You're the first person I've dared to tell. And that's when I understood. We're not lacking in spiritual experiences. We're just lacking someone brave enough to speak first. I wrote a book and I called it, I Came Back to Remember for You. I didn't write it to become famous. I wrote it to preserve a truth, that death is not the end. That love is the only thing that crosses the boundary between life and death. That you don't need to earn love, you already are enough. The book was published, and unexpectedly, it made the top 100 best-selling spiritual books. But what moved me more than any ranking was the handwritten letters I received. I just lost my mother. Your story is the only thing keeping me going. I was going to take my life. But when I read Chapter 7, I believed I still had a chance to come back. Thank you for remembering what I once believed in, but had forgotten. I think back to the moment when the light said to me, Elizabeth, tell this story, because many will need it just to keep living. Back then, I didn't understand. But now I do. I didn't come back for myself alone. I came back to be the echo for the forgotten souls. I came back to rekindle the most sacred thing inside every human being, the ability to love unconditionally. If you asked me, what changed the most after you came back from death? I wouldn't say I love life more. I wouldn't say I believe in God more. And I certainly wouldn't say I became a greater person. I would simply say this. I learned how to listen to the small things I used to overlook. This morning, as the early sunlight poured through the curtains, I sat quietly by the window with a simple cup of coffee. The coffee wasn't anything special, not expensive, but somehow, it felt real, because I was still alive to taste it. I used to drink 10 cups of coffee a day without ever truly tasting it. But now it's different. Every warm drop on my lips feels like a tiny miracle. We lose too many moments simply because we think they're ordinary. My granddaughter, little Amelia, is 6 years old and was the first to ask me without a single trace of doubt in her eyes. I smiled and nodded. Do angels have wings? No. Do they have bright halos? Not really. Then how do you know they're angels? I looked at her and whispered, because when they speak, you no longer feel like a bad person. You feel like you're part of the purest love that's ever existed. She went quiet, then leaned her head on my shoulder. And we sat there, just like that, in a soft and gentle silence. I went to a school to talk to children about love. I accepted an invitation to speak to high school students at a boarding school. The theme of the talk was, if you only had 10 minutes left to live, what would you do? One boy stood up and asked, what if you had died and never come back? I smiled and replied, then you wouldn't be hearing this story right now. The whole auditorium laughed, then fell silent. As I continued, I didn't preach. I spoke like a grandmother passing on a message to her grandchildren. You don't have to die to know what matters most. What matters is who you love, and whether you dare to say that love out loud every single day. I went to a nursing home to listen to people's final questions. There, no one asked me for scientific proof of what I shared. They didn't care about quantum physics or near-death theory. They only asked me one thing. Is someone waiting for me on the other side? I looked them in the eye, without a second of hesitation. Yes. And they've been missing you every single hour. One elderly woman held my hand, tears rolling down her cheeks. I used to think God had forgotten me. But after hearing you, I believe He's still saving a place for me. The last time I dreamed of that place, it was a short dream. I returned to the snow-white valley, where light flowed quietly through every leaf. There were no voices this time, no calling, just me and the beautiful silence. And I understood. I no longer needed to be reminded because I had started to remember. I had brought a piece of heaven back into my heart, and I had planted it through every embrace, every story told, every letter sent, every glance shared. The last letter I wrote was to the woman I once was. Dear Elizabeth, if you're reading this, you're probably feeling lost. Maybe you've just lost someone, or maybe you've lost yourself. Maybe you're wondering if there's any meaning left in being alive. But remember this, there is a part of you that has never been broken. You've just forgotten it's still there. Find it again. Love again. And if you need to, come back just like I did, so you can tell someone else the story. I once asked, why was I allowed to come back? Now I know the answer. To remind you that you are more deeply loved than you realize. And you still have more to offer this world than you ever imagined. If you've ever lost faith, ever wanted to give up, ever feared death so much that you forgot how to live, I'm living proof that what's beyond isn't something to fear, but missing out on this life would be the real tragedy. So love, forgive, keep walking even if your steps tremble, because there is always light ahead, and sometimes that light has your name. Have you ever experienced something you couldn't explain, but that changed you forever? Have you ever lost someone without getting the chance to say, I love you? Or maybe you're quietly walking through an inner death when all hope within you seems to have faded. If my story touched you, leave a comment below. It doesn't have to be big. Just share something you've learned, or someone you want to love one more time, because your words might be the light for someone else who's still lost in the dark. Comment so this story doesn't end with me, but keeps living through you. And if you want to walk this journey with me, to hear more honest, human stories like this one, follow the channel. Not for me, but for you, as you rediscover what life is truly about.